All right, hello everybody, and welcome to this. And this is the first of what I tried to put together for the X-Men Roundtable. We're going to go through the decade by decade of each X-Men era. We're going to take it from the 60s through to now and give an opinion. We've read a couple of issues. We've also got our own opinions on the era, and we're going to look at some of the facts and, in this case, have a bit of a laugh. So,
Yeah.
I tell you, that second issue.
Has
So,
that guy ever appeared after that
oh yeah,
issue?
that's Vanisher. That's Vanisher as in the guy who just died in Second Coming.
Really?
Yeah. But yeah, we'll get into that in a second. Now, I plan to have a couple more people. I've got Eric, as in Branca, Eric on board, Blaze Up Dude, and I've got Geek Revolutions, Captain Logan on board. Eric's having trouble with his internet right now. Don't know whether he got the time for this first recording. And Captain Logan said he can't make it to this one, but he'll be on a future one. And I've also got a friend of mine who's like a super X fan, so we should have probably about 4 or 5 next time. But for this time, when I could stop rambling here, I am Carl, and I am Cythering Productions on YouTube, and I am joined by Joe.
Hey,
And your YouTube channel is I can't pronounce it. Why don't you just say it?
Maginoni 6.
Alrighty, and Wes, who is BK.
Yeah.
YouTube. Okay, cool. So we've all done sort of comment reviews and stuff like that. So let's just start off. This is the first one. I'll ask each of you. Now, obviously, I've done that whole intro on my thing. I'll go to Joe first. What's your taste or knowledge of the X-Men? How much have you read, and how much do you know?
Well, I've read a lot of X-Men. I started from number 1, and I missed a lot of stuff in like the Neil Adam time period. And then I started up again with the all new, all different X-Men.
Cool.
And that's where I really started to enjoy it a lot more.
Well, obviously. But I mean,
Yeah.
you missed out with the Neil Adams run. You missed out when it just started to get good, as in terms of the original cast. But
Right. Like, I remember the part where, Professor X died, supposedly.
oh yeah,
And then there's, like I said, around that time I didn't have access to comics.
well, we'll get
and I
into
didn't
it. Yeah.
So like didn't have a lot of that kind of stuff. But then I remember and then like even with the earlier X-Men, it's like I was just mostly reading them as like collected issues that would come out, or Marvel had those. They used to have these big trades that used to come out, like Son of Origins and things like that. So I would get X-Men and Avengers and things like that through those books.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll certainly get you into it. Pretty much all you need to know about the time period is Havoc and Polaris. That's when they come into it. Wes, what about you? You and the X-Men.
Well, I don't have as much of a knowledge as you guys probably do. I've read, I guess, a big amount of them, X-Men trades, I mean. But, I mean, I have a pretty good working knowledge, but I kind of am sporadic with the trades I read. I've read a bunch of the stuff from Claremont's run. I've read barely anything from the 60s. The issues you sent me are pretty much some of my only exposure to it. I just started reading the X Factor series, both Peter David's and the one before where they had Cyclops on the team and whatnot. I watched a bunch of the shows. I like the X-Men a lot, but I wish I knew more about them and stuff like that. But I have a pretty good knowledge of them overall.
Well, trust me, I went all the way back to number 1, and I'm still confused about some things. I forget some things. Just how many alternate daughters and sons does Cyclops have, and just oh god, it gets so confusing at some point. Pretty much from this point, from the start until the 80s, it's easy to follow. But then as soon as they start getting the spin-offs, it's like, who is where? All right then. So now I sent these guys a couple of issues, which is X-Men number 1 and X-Men number 2, which we'll all do sort of a mini review on, and then we'll get into the era in general. But first, obviously, the X-Men was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in 1963, end of 1963, because it seems these issues were the only ones in that year. And yeah, we're coming up on almost the 50th anniversary. It's a long time, and certainly this wasn't when the X-Men were popular. In fact, they were cancelled after the first run, and it was put into reprints. Now, what's interesting about that is the numbers continued, so when it came back with All New Different, the numbers continued on with the reprints as if they'd been, brand new issues, which is pretty weird. But, yeah, we'll certainly get into that. So, Now, this is the era that most people are not very familiar with, apart from maybe the retcon sort of first class stuff. Now, the first class comic is very different in that it changed the costumes and stuff like that, and it seems like they've retconned that to be what the first class was like because this stuff was so wacky. Yeah, this was straight in the Silver Age. Let's just say that.
Mhm.
And it's very much in that vein. So why don't we go ahead and go straight into X-Men #1, which we all read.
Oh God,
Yeah.
man.
This was pretty funny.
I remember reading this book, and when I reread this last night, I don't remember any of this stuff the way it actually was written, and I could not just stop laughing. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were just totally stunned throughout the entire issue.
What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I took notes on this, and for the first issue, I was just taking like so many notes. Like, first of all, Professor X sends them into a mission when they just finished training. Like, Jean Grey didn't even get her costume on. He's just like, okay,
Yeah.
let's go and face Magneto now. No, it's okay, just go.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I opened the issue, I was like, okay, nowadays we're used kind of in the legacy run to Professor X kind of being a dick. I mean, the whole thing of him mind-wiping people and stuff like that. But here he is actually a full-on dick. Like, I'm not sure whether this was just the way that Authority was back then, but the opening stuff where it was like, X-Men appear before me, turn does not want to be good. It's like, whoa, and then it's like they're all rushing in, and he's like barking orders at them, and then they like lean his recliner back and like start making him comfortable and stuff. It's like if somebody said to me, "If you're not here right now," I'd be like, "It's not you." But I guess that's just maybe the 60s were a little more appreciative of Authority. At least that's the way.
And what about the creep factor where he tells Jean Grey, "Come to my mansion and don't tell anybody but your parents." And she just appears. I'm like, what's going on here?
I also love how like Cyclops is like Professor X's bitch, and he's all like, "No, don't touch him. Don't touch him."
And also in this, he's not Scott Summers in the first issue. I think he becomes in the second issue. He's Slim Summers, which is now his nickname, which is mainly said by Wolverine to take the piss. Which is interesting with that one. And yeah, basically the plot of this is there's the X-Men and Xavier summons them in, they all do training. And again, Xavier being a dick was the best bit for me where I just laughed was when Beefs was doing his thing and he got down and says, "What's my grade, Professor?" He goes, "You'll get your grades in the morning." Jesus Christ. It was just, whoa. He was just an absolute dick to them. And then Jean Grey arrives, the new student, and I can see why she gets with Cyclops, because he's probably the only one that wasn't sexually harassing her as she walked through the doors.
Right.
Beast especially.
I know he was manhandling her, and then everybody was like watching her change.
Yeah, maybe this is acceptable back in the workplace in the 60s. I don't know, but yeah, they were practically all sexually abusing her, and the whole thing where, well, Beast here. I mean, later on he becomes this super scientist, but here he's kind of the dummy. In a way, it's almost like what they did with X Factor later was almost to take the Mickey out of the original Beast. He was sort of the big goof. So yeah, very different. The other thing I noticed that was very different was Professor X said at one point, "And now I'm talking to you with my mind. Soon I won't have to talk to you at all verbally." I guess they forgot that one.
Right.
By the time we get to Claremont, he's doing freaking monologues. So yeah, but what about, let's go to you guys. You obviously had your own thoughts and stuff. That was just stuff I wanted to get out of the way as we got into it.
Well, what about those suits that they were wearing?
Well, the costumes get updated.
Well, the Beast had the purple suit on with the shirt and tie.
Oh right, the civilian costume. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and then the green pants.
Yeah. Well, I just was reading Age of Apocalypse, where everybody's in spandex, even if they're human. So, but that was the 90s for you, I guess. So,
Right.
The fact that these people were in real clothes was probably a good thing. Wes, you said you took notes. Have you got anything on the first one?
Oh yeah, I had a couple of stuff. You guys kind of covered some of it. What I had was the fact that it's a school that he keeps referring to it as a school. There's 3 people. There's 3 students in that school. There's a little more, but there's like Beast, Angel, Iceman, Cyclops, and Jean Grey. Mm-hmm. How is that a school? It's like 5 people in there, and I don't know. It just kind of
it doesn't really become a real school until the New Mutants, really, and then even then you can argue it doesn't become a proper school until Grant Morrison's written. But
Yeah, yeah, and also the fact that did you guys catch when Cyclops was like, okay, stand by, and he's like shooting his like optical blasts at like Beast and Iceman and telling them to like deflect it and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't as wacky as what happened in the second issue, but yeah, they're outright attacking each other. The other thing was, Cyclops' vice seemed to work a little differently to how it's kind of said now. It's not like he's shooting out of the vice, it's like he lifts the flap up and shoots.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I know they changed it later where he had like a button or something like that on his
Yeah,
glove.
that's yeah, button on his glove and on his side of his head, which is what pretty much
Yeah.
he's had to this day. But what about, well, before we get to Magneto, any other notes on the first half?
Let's see. I also like how as soon as Jean Grey walks in the door, he gives her a superhero name. Like he's like, okay, you're Marvel Girl.
Whoa,
And she's
okay.
just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like she didn't even technically agree to go to the school yet, but
Yeah.
yet she's already a part of the team, and here's your costume, and let's go save the world.
It's like, okay, you've just walked through the door. Let's go fight a supervillain. So it just so happens on this day that they've finally got their fifth team member, that the first evil mutant appears, and this, of course, is Magneto. He is a far cry from the Nazi criminal that we've seen in First Class, for instance. Eric Lencher is not here in full, and one thing about the way he was drawn was the horns were obviously more pronounced, which kind of stays for a while. The other thing was his cape was really short, whereas I'm used to now where it's like this massive, almost Batman-style flowing cape. But the look of Magneto is pretty much stay the same. But here he breaks into Cape Citadel, takes it over, and he's planning to launch nukes, I guess, to kill the humans.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I'd
I'm
like-
back.
Yeah,
I liked how he did that skywriting. Surrender your base, Magneto.
What I find funny here is that it seems like Magneto early on, it was more about magnetic fields than it was about him lifting metal. And for a while, that seems to be the case. Like, nowadays, all of this magnetic field stuff is just to help him fly, whereas all the other powers is just him lifting metal, pretty much. Whereas here, it's like he makes force fields and just...
Yeah.
It's about everything. And by the time you get to the 90s, it gets ridiculous. Like, he can alter people's iron in their blood to make them change their heads or something. I don't know. I was reading some of that stuff the other day. But no, this is... he was basically... All he needed was a mustache to twirl at this point. This Magneto. And he takes over the cape, and then the X-Men come. Now, what I found interesting was... Where was all this fear and hated mutant stuff? They were like, oh, the X-Men, you're superheroes. Well,
Yeah.
go ahead. And they save the day. Magneto gets away, and you'll get you next time, X-Men, all this stuff. And then they say, oh, X-Men, this name will be remembered with honor. We, the United States military, is very happy. It's like, I don't think so. How long until you start building Sentinels? So I guess that idea of racial prejudice to the series wasn't really added as much until later on. So yeah, Wes, you've got notes, so I'll hand over to you.
Yeah. Well, what I found interesting was that this issue was kind of relevant because Magneto had anything, he was going to launch nukes, and this is the 60s. So I guess that's kind of reflective of their fears in the 60s and whatnot and stuff like that. I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was kind of weird how, yeah, you said the X-Men just walk in. They're just like, oh, it's okay. The X-Men can walk in. I guess that can kind of be explained away by the fact that I guess by this point in the Marvel Universe, they're kind of used to superheroes. But also, if I saw, 5 colorfully dressed, teenagers just walk in and be like, we'll handle this. And then they just walked in, they didn't handle it because the guy escaped.
I guess whatever general this was that says, the X-Men will remember with honor, I guess he gets dispatched by the time we get to the mutants later on.
Yeah. Magneto doesn't seem that... I mean, he seems like a threat, but he doesn't seem like the really dangerous, I can, kill you with one finger Magneto like he is later.
No.
He kind of has to, yeah, you mentioned the force field and stuff like that. I don't really know how that works. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of wacky and stuff like that.
It's the Silver Age. They didn't need to explain it. Later on, I think they've tried to explain it with, like, he can make magnetic poles around himself or something. I don't know. Which is I don't know, but either way, yeah, the first issue X-Men fight Magneto is just, I just found it hilarious how Xavier was just being to them, and this continues into issue 2.